there is that sense and that feeling of a lot of talented people of having that sand kicked in your face. Like, you don't want that to happen again. So there is probably an added edge that's gone into preparation from the top on down to all the players. It's Major League Sports. It's competitive.
Welcome to Baseball Biz on Deck. I'm Mark Carpenter, your host, and with me is my co-host, Mr. Mat Germain, the man who digs deep, the man who analyzes everything and shows us the ugly truth of what's going on in baseball and the shining moments that we all love to watch on the field. That's Mr. Mat Germain. Hey, Matt, how you doing today, buddy?
I am living the dream, buddy. How about you?
I am alive, my friend. It is spring training almost. It's pitchers and catchers report. Living down here in Florida, it's always great to see all these teams start to bud up. You know, even a week or two ago, you start seeing familiar faces coming to town, warming up before spring training officially starts. It is an exciting time, man. It's to see all these teams, the expectations of the future, people who want to live on laurels from last year, maybe not, and those who don't want to look back at what's happened in the past. At the beginning of this, I did play a little bit from Mr. Aaron Boone. It was interesting to listen to him talking about, tired of getting sand kicked in his face. And Matt, when you think about last year for the Yankees, it was. I mean, the boys, they didn't make it to the postseason. Good Lord, man.
Yeah, and I think the shocking thing to me was how many different teams kicked sand in their faces. It wasn't just the Rays this time. It was, a gamut of teams. So Aaron Boone has a lot of pressure on his shoulders. I think Brian Cashman does too. It'll be interesting to see how they perform.
It is going to be. I know I was looking, somewhere on MLB Network, and they were putting the leader of the AL East was going to be the Yankees this year. And I thought, let's see, I think that the Orioles are going to have that path pretty well. But we'll talk about the Orioles and some of the challenges they have as well up and coming. But it's going to be a tough year. I don't think anybody's going to be going through this very easily because there's been changes. We're going to talk about that. We'll talk about some of the free agents, what's going on there. We'll talk how Scott Boras has got his thumb on the game of the talent and new ownership with the Orioles too. So let's get started, buddy. Pitchers and catchers report. You did a pretty good assessment I saw on Twitter, Matt, on the pitchers. It kind of break down maybe the top 10 of some of those.
I think it's always important. Like a lot of times you can put a lot of focus on the depth of a pitching staff, which is really important. We're seeing that already with a few injuries trickling in. But I think it's also important to assess who has a true leader in their staff. There's a few teams that we've seen invest more than they have in recent years anyway, on their teams. And part of that reason, I think, is because they finally found their ace. So you're talking about teams like the Royals with Cole Ragans and the Detroit Tigers with Tarik Skubal. I think both of those guys are ready to step into that ace caliber role. It's not to say they're going to be aces all year long. There's a lot of pressure. It'll be up and down starts here and there. But I think they're ready to take that step to lead their staffs. And once you have that settled, everything else seems to fall in line afterwards. And I think that's why in those two cases, you're seeing a huge investment. Well, Bobby Witt Jr. has a lot to do with it in Kansas City as well. Probably the most electric player in baseball, in my opinion, right now. And if he makes up on his full potential, it's going to be interesting. But yeah, those teams, and I think the other interesting part when you look at those pitchers is when you have George Kirby and Logan Gilbert, more than likely taking that next step forward, and really impressive group behind them in Seattle. I think it's easy to overlook that team and realize that they probably do have the potential to have two ace caliber guys on their staff.
You mentioned Logan Gilbert, and I think even last year, most people didn't realize what this young man's been doing coming up. He's been exciting. I know he trains here near me in Plant City occasionally, but to see a young man emerged like that coming up into the system. And Seattle, I mean, if they're not having a bang up season, I think they kind of get lost as far as when people are looking at analysts and saying what's happening with that team and somebody like Logan Gilbert.
Yeah, the thing with the Mariners, they make so many changes every year. There's no consistency on that team whatsoever. Now,
Yeah.
having said that, the Rays were known to be that for a while, but I think in terms of the lineup, Rays have settled things down over the years, and you're seeing more consistency in the lineup. And I'm hoping that the changes that the Mariners made this year stick for a bit, so that we can see what they can manage with the team they have, generally speaking. So the two impact guys I think they added this year that'll really help make the most out of their staff are Mitch Garver and Jorge Polanco, because they really got nothing out of second base last year, and they really needed a boost in their lineup. And then, of course, they picked up Luke Raley from the Rays, who, can have hot months here and there to help chip in some power at the bottom of the lineup. And they brought back Mitch Haniger as hoping that he recatches the lightning that he had when he was with the Mariners before. But the problem with that approach is that they did deal away a lot of their young talents. So they're betting a lot on guys um, that are new, except for Mitch Haniger. And so that chemistry may not be there this year. They may have to wait till next year. And that's why I say, if it doesn't work out this year, just ride it out a bit. Don't pull the trigger and trade the whole team again, Jerry. See what they got. Like, try to get them to groove together, and then, we'll see.
It is becoming more and more apparent that some of these owners had a team just as an investment and didn't know what to do with it when they got them. And I'm speaking specifically of what's going on, with Oakland.
Mm-hmm.
And what they're going to move these boys and girls to Vegas, and then the Vegas mayor said, I really don't see them coming here.
Well, yeah, Vegas pretty much said, we'll take you, but we're going to tell you where you're going. That's essentially what Vegas said, which I find is a really interesting approach, because they hold all the power, to be honest. Now, when I say they, I mean, it's not one person in Vegas, I would imagine. I think there's probably a lot of players there, but they're not going to get as sweetheart a deal as I think they thought they were going to get.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a little bit of power pull. Now, I don't remember when the Raiders went there. Maybe you do. How smooth their stadium build was.
Yeah.
I think there was some contentious, talk before it got done. Eventually, it did get done. I still think, there's room for them in Oakland. I just don't think there's the corporate support there that they would get in Vegas. So MLB is ready to do whatever it takes to get them in Vegas, and they want a presence there for gambling purposes and everything else. It just makes so much sense.
Well, as long as we're talking about owners, I think in seeing Vegas, they do have the control, they do have the money, they do have the corporate support, like you said, and they're just not going to find that in Oakland. I mean, the owner, I think, has pretty much snubbed a lot of people. He certainly snubbed the fans, but they'd love to have the team, but not with him. And ownership could be an issue. We see, though, with the Orioles, a lot of those fans have been not necessarily happy with the ownership. That's going to change. Look at David Rubenstein, man. He's going to be coming in with the Orioles here and paid $1.725 billion to own that team.
This is where my argument for having a salary floor is, because when owners are allowed to operate teams the way that he's operating the A's, it's just such a detriment to that fan base. And like, to have him, let's say he's there for 5 years doing this kind of stupidity. And I lived through longer than that as an Expos fan. So I understand completely where Oakland fans are coming from. But let's say you do that for 5 years, maybe even a bit longer. You're losing a whole generation of fans that are not going to pay attention to that team. They're going to adopt other teams. They're going to be NBA fans. They're going to be NFL fans. They're going to concentrate on other things. They're going to ignore baseball, pretty much, in that entire area. So if you're going to place a professional sports team, especially when you have so few in a city, you need to make sure there's a bare minimum quality product. And that's on the commissioner, to be quite honest,
Yeah.
to instill that kind of whatever system they want to use. It doesn't have to be a cap, a floor. Maybe it could be a penalty, like they get penalized something if they don't spend a certain amount. I don't know, whatever they want to use, but there has to be some accountability for owning an MLB team. Now, I don't know where that, because of we don't get all of the looks in terms of the books. We do for the Braves, I think, in terms of a public company. So we have a better idea now of what it may look like because of that. But I think that's where it starts. I'm hoping the next commissioner that comes in will be able to get them there to that point where they open the books, where we know what's going on behind the scenes, so that we can have more accountability in terms of who's spending what, how, and why.
Well, while I started talking about spring training, we kind of got over into what's going on with the owners and the commissioner. There has been more news about the commissioner today, hadn't there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there is. He's going to step aside after this term. So
Wow.
hopefully he leaves some strength behind, and hopefully the next commissioner doesn't call it a piece of metal
Oh, God.
when we talk about the trophy. And I think that, to me, is the biggest failure of Rob Manfred, is not promoting the game with pride.
Yeah.
It's been very lackluster, grim, gray. Some things that the league has done as a whole is great, but it's not him. Him as a commissioner has been a terrible promoter of Major League Baseball. The World Series has tanked. It is the worst ratings of any finals event in professional sports. And that has to change. Something has to give. And you can't sit there as a commissioner and let that happen and not do something about it. They haven't changed the World Series format in forever. They've
Yeah.
changed everything else. So now it's time to attend to that. I think it's time to set a location for the World Series and not have it at the home team's location, or at least part thereof. I don't know if you do the first 3 games in a city and then the last, 4 games in the other cities. I don't know. There's got to be a way to do it, because not having that location takes away the ability to market this World Series the way it should be marketed. And it takes it away from being on the national stage as a result, because it's not an event. It's more of a local event instead of a national event.
We just went through the Super Bowl, and we know the Super Bowl is always set for a city that's not necessarily going to be the teams that are going to make it to the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be interesting if you put up, can you imagine? All right, if you have 7 games and you do potential for 4 different locations, 2 games here. Go ahead.
Me, 7 games, 10 days, 1 location would work. You go to that 1 location, you get them done. Yes, you have a few off days here and there. Not many. Not like what you have now, which is ridiculous. By the time they get to the next game, I've forgotten it's still going. It's that bad, where I'm like, is it still on? Like, what? And then I'm a huge fan. So imagine, the casual fan. I don't know. There's a lack of anticipation and kind of consistency with the way the playoffs work right now.
I'll add one thing to that. Think about the possible expansion cities, and
Yes.
that those would be maybe the first ones with this new format. I like it. I like it a lot.
Well, those will help too. To me, that's your opportunity to not have bye weeks or bye games, because that hurts all the teams that are in the bye. To be honest, everybody knows that. Like, you can't have a baseball team sitting still. I don't care what they do on the side. It's not the same as being in the game. And then the other one's rusty, the other one's sharp. You have to have enough wild cards so that everybody plays all the way through.
When you have a Super Bowl planned, years in advance where it's going to be held at, and the marketing and the planning and all that there's so much more that can be done by the city and MLB with something like that. That would be huge.
Especially the acts, right? Like, think about, if you have 10 days, how many musical acts can you invite to that? Just every night could be a different act. You could have 7 of them or 6 of them. maybe you want to bank on 5 at least, right? Because you
Yeah.
don't know what happens after that. But anyways, I think it's time. That's the next thing that elevates baseball to me, is to revamp how the World Series is done.
Well, maybe we'll see Rob roller skate his way out like Drake, and who would come in? I've got a couple of candidates, my friend, in my mind. Who do you have? I've got 2 right now. I'll tell you who they are in a second. Do you have any?
I really don't, because I think the what we lack in terms of knowledge is what the owners are looking for, and that's a really tough thing to gauge. They're more concerned with things that we don't even consider when it comes to Major League Baseball. I do think they want someone normally that has some sort of business acumen for the most part. Um, so I don't
Now,
know. Who
well,
do you have?
I have 2 people, and I don't think either one of them are lawyers, believe it or not. And let's see, but man, they've lived the game. They've been in management, and both of them are working with MLB, and that is Theo Epstein and Kim Ang. I'd love to see either one of those people take the reins. I think that their love of the game. You take Kim; she worked with MLB before she worked with the Yankees, before she worked with the Marlins, and I would think she could do some great things. She left the Marlins, I think, because they gave up on what they're going to do for the future, and she didn't see any reason to be there. That's my
Very
assessment.
very intriguing option there.
Hmm.
I think Kim Ng would be a statement, like, of all the professional leagues. I think she would be the first ever female commissioner. Um, and I think Theo Epstein is a no-go because of his ownership of the Red Sox. I think he
Uh,
took an ownership stake.
yep.
Uh, I think there's always somebody that we don't know about, because, like I said, there's a lot of backroom talks, and you have to appease to the strongest players. So who are the Dodgers and the Yankees going to support simultaneously? And Jim Crane, and so
Mm.
you have a lot of big, big, and really, yeah, Steve Cohen, right? There's a lot of guys with a lot at stake that are investing a ton of money. So they're going to want to influence that choice because they want to make sure that the league is optimized. I'm hoping whoever it is has some sort of ability to promote the game the way it should be promoted, and to resolve the media issues. So when I think of those 2 things, that's a tall ask of whoever comes in. So maybe Kim Ming is the right person. Maybe she isn't. I have no idea. I don't know how heavy she is marketing background wise and media wise. But whoever it is, that would be my guess. Is it'll be somebody with some experience in media, business, and marketing, because that's really what they need most.
Yeah, and I'm thinking of her, I think, more as a negotiator. And I think with when she was with Cashman and the Yankees, she was part of the one who got Jarrett Coe his contract. You got me to
Yeah.
say it, didn't you, Jarrett? Yeah. So this is not a minor leaguer as far as somebody who knows the inner workings of the MLB and of the teams, and
Mm.
who knows how to. I think everything I've read about her, she comes and sits in the room. She's there. She's not necessarily overbearing, but she knows she's got business to take care of, and she does it. And I think she stood her ground with the Marlins. So
Yeah.
she that says to me she's a strong person. I'd love to hear other candidates. Anybody out there wants to send something in to either Matt or I, please do so. But yeah, let's come back then to the free agents. Let's talk about your free agent team that you put together, Matt. Who all do you have on that list? And I realize some of these guys may have signed by this afternoon.
Yeah, I know. Well, I think I remember most of them. There was Kurt Casale behind the plate, who I think might have just agreed to a minor league deal. I'd have to look. Um, but like, there's not much left at the catcher position, and normally there's a reason for that. They're all reporting right now.
Yeah.
So if they haven't signed, then they're kind of twiddling their thumbs, and that's not a good thing for a catcher. The first base was Brandon Belt, who I think will add significant value to wherever he goes. I don't think he's a fit with the Rays, who have 30 first basemen ready to go. But the there's teams out there that need that DH role filled, and they need that left-handed pop. Now, he could go back to the Jays because he did have success there. I get the feeling that they don't want him there just because they want to keep Vladdy as an option at DH.
Yeah.
And they probably want to rest George Springer a little bit more than they have in the past. But anyways, he's a very, solid candidate. I think in left field we had Tommy Pham. In right field we had Adam Duvall. Both, good corner outfielders with some grit. Duvall's had some issues staying on the field. I think Pham had a couple of injury things, but they're older. You could put David Peralta in there as well. I think he's still available. But between those three, you're talking about guys that are filling roles. I think maybe Eddie Rosario is another one that hasn't found a job yet. Matt Chapman at third base, obviously. I think he's overvaluing himself big time, and I don't understand still why he's not with the Giants and back with, the guy that managed him in Oakland for years. It just makes too much sense. He would improve all of their pitching with his defense.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, for a team that's trying to take that next step forward, to me, he's an obvious fit. Obviously, they'd have to move JD Davis or Lamonte Wade or somebody from that roster because they do have a 40-man issue. You can make those things happen with other teams looking for help, like the Marlins, etc. Anyways, the the other thing that I think is interesting is when you start looking at the second base and shortstop options, which, with Merrifield, he told everybody in Major League Baseball, I only want to play one position and it's going to be second base. And the entire league said, well, good luck with that. Because your value is in your versatility. And if you're telling us that you're not going to be versatile, then we don't really want to pay you what you want. So, it's those are the kinds of things that I think free agents sort of, they should let their agents talk. Sometimes it's one of those things you might want to mention after you sign a deal.
There you go, brother. There you go.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. As soon as that pen goes down to paper and say, "Oh, and by the way, yeah, let's get this done first. Let the ink dry, maybe." But wow,
Yeah. Everybody knows. Yeah, everybody knows the guys that are utility players and why their value is high. And to me, I don't even understand as a competitor. Like, if your team needs you somewhere, you go. Like, there's a reason they're putting you out there. You're their best option at a time, and you should take that as a compliment. Not look at Mookie Betts as a good example, right?
Yeah.
One of the greatest players in the game went to the outfield. He was a fine second baseman. There was no reason to move him off of second base. The Dodgers told him, you know what? We need you in right field because of XYZ. He went to the outfield in XYZ. And then they said, well, we want to save your legs, so we're going to put you back at second base. He said, okay, I'll go back to second base. Like, if Mookie Betts is willing to do that, Whit Merrifield should put his hand up every time and say, I'll play whatever you want. You know what I mean? Anyways.
Yeah.
Oh,
no, I get it.
Hmm?
Time and again, I sometimes I refer back to my years of when I was doing sales with digital. One of the hardest lessons to learn was learning when the hell to shut up. And so I'm thinking these guys getting the deals done, but then they're going to say something to injure. They're actually closing in with not having the flexibility that you're talking about. That it's a shame because this is a game a lot of people want to play, and there's a lot of talent out there. And you may be a top talent, but guess what? There's a glut of some really great players out there. I mean,
yeah. How much money has he lost from saying that? That's
well, all right. We're talking about money loss. Let's talk about Scott Boras.
There we go. I lined you up for it. That's good.
Oh, I'll tell you, you think about it. You and I were talking before the show, looking back historically with Bryce Harper and the Phillies, and you say, oh, he's a position player. It doesn't matter so much that he's not there at the very first day of spring training. But you and I both know when it comes to things like pitching, that is critical for those people to get in there, loosen up their arms, get relaxed, a good rapport with their catcher, and all that needs to happen early on. But Scott Boras has got two pitchers that aren't there yet. I mean, he's got, was it Blake Snell and Jordan Montgomery? Wow.
Yeah, and each of them has their issues. Jordan Montgomery, nobody wants to believe what he did in Texas is for real. And why is that? Because the Yankees told the world he wasn't good enough to do it. And yet he went out and did it, but he did it once. And I'm like, well, I believe what he did versus what the Yankees are telling me that he would have done. Because if you look at who the Yankees banked on, it's been crap behind Jerry Cole. So, I mean, their pitching coach in New York is saving them a lot of times because he's doing the Kyle Snyder thing a little bit, where he's actually gaining a lot of mileage on their pitchers instead. But I think when you're looking at Blake Snell in particular, which irritates me because to me, every team that is a competitive team should be willing to give him 30 million per and go as far as 6 because he's never shown any inkling of health issues, right?
Right.
It doesn't seem like anybody's willing to even hit that. And we're talking about 180 for 6, right? And that is a very, I don't want to say it's low because for any of us, that's a ridiculous amount of money, right? And the president of the United States will never come close to that amount of money. So the hard thing to say is that it's almost like a low ball for a 2-time Cy Young winner.
Yep.
Now, having said that, if there was a magnet in the middle of the plate and you put magnets all around that ball, he could not hit the middle of that plate every time. You just can't. He doesn't know where it's going. The hitter doesn't know where it's going. And a lot of times he doesn't have any command of his pitches, but it works because he throws enough strikes or he's erratic enough that it gets to the hitters where they're saying eventually he's going to come to the plate and gets them out. I look at results when I look at Blake Snell. That's the way I value him. And we've watched him in Tampa Bay enough to know that, he may not do it in a pretty way. It'll be frustrating to watch. It's not watching Pedro Martinez or Greg Maddux painting corners or coming inside to be aggressive against the hitter. No, this is going to be a guy whose stuff is so elite that nobody can do anything with it. That's it. So if you're investing your money, you're the owner, and your GM comes to you and tries to sell you Blake Snell, that's how he should sell him. He's like, it's going to be 5 innings or 6, the vast majority of the time, and we're fine with that because we've built the bullpen to supplement the rest of it. And as long as you have that every 5th game, you're golden. Now, the counter to that, and this is why he hasn't signed yet, is when you see guys like Zach Littell and you see guys that get like Jeffrey Springs, that get picked up off waivers, they're getting paid nothing and they're doing that or more. So, it's that whole how much benefit. So if you're going from spending $1 million a year to 30 to gain what? How many wins is he going to bring you more than what your pitching coach and staff may be able to create? That's the counterbalance to Jordan Montgomery and Blake Snell, is that when you're taking the margins that they will give you above and beyond, they're slim. Now, again, the GM needs to sell when we go into the playoffs and we're looking at our 1st, 2nd, and 3rd starter. You want one of those guys in there for good reason, right? That's I think we almost right now we could call maybe 80% of the playoff teams just based off the rosters, experience, everything else, right? So when you're spending that kind of coin on a pitcher, it's to be that guy in the playoffs. It has to be. And if not, then don't spend it. Keep it. Like, that's just the way it is. So I don't know. I think, like you said, with Scott Boras, he's always going to aim for that top dollar for those guys. I think he's trying to oversell them way too much.
Yeah.
It's like somebody trying to sell you a car has been in a wreck for a couple of years, right? And the frame's a little bent, and you're like, I don't know. Like you're telling me it's a beautiful car. It is this, it is that, it's whatever, but it's got these two dents in it, and I can't really, get away from those. Um, I think he's aiming too high. I do think those sign, and that he has offers he's comfortable with, or else he wouldn't be sitting on them the way he is.
Yeah.
I just think that it's going to be a detriment to the team that signs them, because the later you get pitchers into spring training, historically, the worse they've done. And that's the detriment that I think we're talking about before the show. That is sad that your players don't get to perform to their optimal levels, all because of greed, essentially, which is sad.
The talk is mostly I've heard today is Blake Snell and the Yankees, and they've got the pockets for it. And the greed that you're talking about, I mean, it starts with Scott Boras being able to give a pitcher or a player a sense of your worth is this. That team can afford you. They need you to get to the World Series. So I get him as a salesperson doing that, but my fear is always that it'll wind up, it'll be 2 weeks from now, Blake Snell signing a 2 or 3 year contract, with less money than we would have ever guessed he'd got. But it's part of the game. It's how it works. I don't like it, but these boys and girls got to make their own decisions.
Wait, did you hear that in Major League Baseball now is really because of this, because of the Scott Boras tactic? They want to put in that timeline that pitchers or that free agents have to sign by end of December or something like that. And there's no way the MLBPA will ever let it happen.
No.
No way. Like if you want to talk about issues that could result in a strike, that would be almost the number one issue.
Yeah.
Like it would just not happen. Like baseball is just dead set against it, right? So why even whisper it? Like I don't understand what the tactic is there. When you talk about being tone deaf as a commissioner, that's part of what I'm talking about, right? Yeah.
Oh gosh, I don't know, brother. So Blake Snell, Jordan Montgomery. So wait for Cody Bellinger, Matt Chapman, and JD Martinez. Bellinger, I thought 2 or 3 times he was going to be signed with somebody last week, but that didn't happen. And
so how do you come up with predictions? Like all these sites and everybody else has come up with predictions without knowing where these guys are going to land. You're talking about hefty game changers for a lot of teams, right? I'll give you an example. Let's say, because they have the money for it, let's say the Giants sign both Blake Snell and Jordan Montgomery. What happens to your rankings then in the NL West, right? Same thing if they sign in Detroit. Detroit can afford both. The Orioles are just losing guys right now. They could still supplement, with one or two. Anyways, there's too much left on the table. And didn't I hear the Cubs say that they were going to be very aggressive and we're not done? You wait, we're going to be. It was almost like, remember the Phillies? They were saying we're going to spend stupid money, and then they spent no money. It was like one of those things. It was after they signed Stephen Harper, and it was like, oh, or Bryce Harper, sorry, where we're going to, spend a ridiculous amount of money, and then everybody was like, well, where was this spending? But the Cubs should be on one of them at least. I think Cody Bellinger makes a lot of sense. I still want to see Cody Bellinger go to the Royals. I think Bellinger hitting behind Bobby Witt Jr. would be ideal for both of them. I think they need some impact in the outfield, and MJ Melendez is not a great outfielder. He can spend a little bit more time in DH. They're going to lose Salvi Perez pretty soon as a leadership role kind of guy. His money comes off the books. He's about $20 million a year. So they can afford Cody Bellinger. To me, if you want to talk about a team, like they have that Cole Ragans, they have, they added Chris Stratton and Will Smith to their pen. They've got really solid team overall. It's not great, but if you add Cody Bellinger, suddenly, in the Central especially, they become a real threat to win that division, which is weird. I never thought you'd say that this year.
Well, about the Royals, yeah. I mean, to me, I've got a special place for the Royals anyway. And Salvador Perez, he's been the only shining light when I looked at them each year. So excitement to watch that man, what he does behind the plate, watch what he does, when he's taking the ball and knocking it out of the park. Has been exciting. And I kept saying, man, wouldn't it be nice if they had a team? I want to go to Kansas City and see the Negro League Baseball Museum. So I'd have something besides that to go see when I went there. I could actually go see a baseball team too. But anyway, I have no compelling feeling because I'm not a football fan to go to Kansas City. But it sounds like maybe this year Royals might have a team worth watching. I don't know. We'll see.
I think so. They've made those moves that will actually keep them more consistent. So a lot of those close games, they'll win more of those instead of losing them. And I do think Bobby Witt Jr. is a special talent. Like to do what he did last year with literally no support in that lineup, nothing. Like it was just just a dead flat line, right? And then you had Bobby Witt, which was like, anyways. So, and I think he got better through the year. The other thing that I wanted to say is in Milwaukee, I don't think they're done. I know they traded Corbin Burns. To me, and Willie Adames is not going to stick around in Milwaukee. I think he'd be a great fit in Miami. You've got Peter Bendix down there who knows Willie Adames really well. They're willing to trade pitching to get a position player. Now Willie Adames's offense has really become lackluster. Last year he had some struggles. So, but I think he's solid enough defensively that it would, they'd be okay with it. It's just that they would need an extra piece on top of that. Maybe, their top catching prospect could be that guy, but I think they're really high on him. Anyways, all that to say, I think there's a fit. And if they are able to clear enough room in Milwaukee to make it work, that would be an outstanding landing spot for Blake Snell. You're talking about Matt Arnold. Matt Arnold was the scouting director that selected Blake Snell in the draft. So you're talking about with the Rays at the time. So you're talking about a history there, right?
Yeah.
That would be ideal. I think Milwaukee, in terms of an atmosphere and a city for Blake Snell, would be perfect. There'd be none of this New York, stress. The fans just adopt you as one of their own when you get there. And so, yes, there'd be a great fit if he went back to Seattle because it's his home place. Yes, the Giants would be, much better, much improved with Blake Snell. He'd always be battling the Dodgers. He would always be on the West Coast in one of the worst traveling places if he went to Seattle. So why not go to Milwaukee, settle down, and kind of lead a young club? And probably, I don't want to know. I think when you're talking about 30 and 180, the Brewers would be skeptical of going that far. 28 though, 27-ish maybe. Maybe they give him some opt-outs and so maybe 2 or 3 years in, if he doesn't like it, he can change places. But to me, I think the Brewers aren't done, basically, is what I'm trying to say. Same with the Mets.
Well, the Mets, yeah. I'm curious to see how both of those play up. But Blake, Milwaukee, I would enjoy seeing him there. I really thought that the Giants would have gotten him, or kept him. You make some good points though about being out on that coast and being in that division and who you're up against. But I could see him in Milwaukee. And I started hearing the discussions about Adames no longer being with Milwaukee, moving him around. I hadn't thought about Miami, but that would be a good place for him. Even if he hasn't had his best year, Adames has always had a sparkling energy that seems to infuse the rest of the teammates around him. And I haven't watched that so much last year as I have in the past, but to me, I think of him in the same sense that I think of Mookie Betts as somebody who's a leader with the team.
Right.
And he could possibly bring that
the glue
to
guy.
Miami.
He brings everybody together.
Yeah.
And he keeps everybody happy to come to the field every day. Like he's just easygoing, and I think if you had him and Arraez together on the same team, they would kind of camaraderie that would take him pretty far.
Yeah, you mentioned Arraez. It's something about him. I'll quickly say. I was going to say this. I think I'll do a show with Lou Schiff about the Marlins. He just finalized arbitration where he was looking for $12 million. It's got $10 million from Miami, and if you look at arbitration, see who was it? Who's the guy? Take on it. Blue Jays. Thank you, Vladdy.
Yep.
Vladdy's getting, I think, about 19 million in arbitration. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll let you finish your thought. Go ahead.
No, I just sense a parity of talent. I don't. It's just that you look at Luis Arias. He's got won't be until 2026 before he can be a free agent either. So he's got a little bit more leg room. He went from like 2 million to 6 million to 10 million.
Right.
So we'll see. And that's all I got to say about that.
No, but I want to talk about the ridiculousness of taking Vladdy to arbitration over that 1.85 million. They were ready to hand Shohei Ohtani $700 million. And at the same time, they essentially backhand Vladdy Guerrero over a $1.8 million bill. Like, explain that to me. Like, it just does not make any sense. He is the franchise. If he leaves, what do you have in Toronto? You have aging pitching and Bo Bichette, and that's it. And that's if he sticks around. You don't even know that.
No.
So the way they're treating Vladdy Guerrero Jr. is just, it is the epitome of why I no longer, talk about the Blue Jays anymore. I just, as soon as they let Anthopoulos go, I was like, they just don't get it. They don't understand winning. And that's sad to say for a franchise that before in the 90s had a clue. And they've lost that clue. And I don't know why. Bringing back the same coaching staff with what happened last year, it just doesn't make sense either. Like, there's no changes. If anything, they got worse over the offseason. And I don't understand where they're going. I don't. Anyways, I just wanted to say that thing about Vladdy Jr. I think he's going to end up going out in free agency and finding a new home. I think his dad will talk to him and say, I did it. It was fine. I had fun when I went other places. And the Angels would probably offer him a boatload of money to go there and replace Ohtani, right?
You disrespect a player. I know we say it's business, so don't take it personal. But you disrespect a player, don't be surprised if they're not engaging when it does come to that time of free agency. And with Blake Snell, what was it, Matt? You'll remember this better than I do. When I don't know if it was before he got the Cy Young Award or whatever, but they were throwing a little something his way. It was like $50,000. It was dog meal.
Yeah, it wasn't just him. There was 2 or 3 guys that all refused it, and they were like, this is insulting after what they had done. So yeah, I think,
come on, people, wake up. You're dealing with other human beings, and I think if you offer them something that it's an insult. I mean, it's less insulting if there was nothing being offered than in some of these cases. It says, I really don't think you're worth it, and we're making god awful amount of money and between television rights and everything else to boot. And well, high horse time. I'll step down, brother, because I get really on that when I feel like management cries about how much they pay players because they only pay them because they're making the money with them.
Yep. Well, the good example is Corbin Burns. He's not in Milwaukee now. They knew he wasn't re-signing because of what was said in arbitration. Yeah. When you take somebody to arbitration, you're going to open up their cupboard and you're going to take out the cobwebs and you're going to, basically expose them to the courts and so, or whatever, the arbitrator. So it's a sad system. I don't like the system. I don't think it should be run that way. And I think that the Rays are probably showing a little bit of their hand in terms of how long Jason Adam and Harold Ramirez are going to be sticking around, for example. But I think you can always tell when they do take a player to arbitration, there's a good chance that player will be dealt in the next year or two.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Well, brother, so pitchers and catchers report. Oh, Matt, it has been another entertaining session here with you, buddy. Any other things you think we should cap on to this particular episode?
Not this episode. I think the interesting things to watch now are the injury issues. The Orioles are going through the gamut of injury news like the Rays got last year. And I think the good thing for them is like what we just talked about before, where Scott Boras is slow playing the market. Well, they have room now they have room in their budget big time. They're only just under 100 million. They could add another, great player if they want and some, make up for some of that. So I think some of the offseason moves that may still happen. I still feel like we're not done the offseason, which is weird. We're at that point. The other thing I would say is that there's going to be a lot of assumptions made, through spring training and into the regular season about teams without a thorough look at what they have coming in their systems. So when you're watching spring training and you're enjoying, don't discount what they do in those games. It's important, and it shows you a little bit of what talents they have coming up. Case in point was last year, Josh Lowe and Luke Raley were raking in spring training, and everybody was discounting it. Oh, well, they sucked last year. Oh, blah, blah. And then what do you know? They carried the team for a good chunk of the season. And so pay attention to spring training, because there's guys in there that are hungry, they're lit up, and they're going to have an impact through the season, or they'll get called up later on this season and become huge pieces. I also think it's a great marketing tool. So if you're going to trade players and they do great in spring training, all of a sudden that's a little nugget for the GM to use later on and say, hey, remember that guy that was lighting it up in spring? You can have him if you give me this guy. So that's what I do in spring training mostly. I take notes and I'm like, oh, well, that guy's interesting. Well, that guy's kind of, anyways. So it's just, that's what I would finish off with, is to say spring training's here. When the games start, pay attention, watch the games, don't get too bored, and know that this is the chance for those guys to show their teams what they can do.
All right, man. We all got our homework there, watching what involves with these different teams and through the spring training. I mean, it's interesting. We get to see a lot of great talent take the field, but because they're so deep too, we don't usually see them maybe for more than 3 or 4 innings in a game. But but you get to see all these younger guys come up as well. So it's an exciting time. You and I often talk about the Rays. We'll do that soon as well. And I'll just kind of impart on my last thing saying about the commissioner. I'd like to see Kim Eng there. I think I love to hear other people's what they like as far as their comments on who would be a commissioner. And I also reach out to our good buddy in Miami, Lucia, who's a judge as well. And he could bring the legal expertise and the love of the game together. I think Lou could be a fine candidate for a commissioner of MLB. So,
absolutely.
All right.
Both of them are solid. Kim Eng, I'm completely on board with. I think she would do an outstanding job. And I think Jenny Kavnar is the first play-by-play announcer in MLB history. She's going to do the A's games. To have a commissioner announced as a woman as well would be outstanding.
Oh yeah.
I'm in on that. So sell it up, man. I'll do something about it on Twitter too, and we can post or whatever it's called now, X.
Sorry, it's X Twitter, formerly known as Twitter. That's right. We'll do like Prince, formerly known as. Yeah, okay.
I'm always going to call it Twitter. That's terrible.
Yeah, I'm sorry. All right, brother. Well, hang on. Oh, thank you all again for joining us here today on Baseball Biz on Deck, and that's Mr. Mat Germain. And if you want to find him on X Twitter, it's Matt MAT_Germain. GERMAIN_. And that's where you find him at Matt MAT_Germain GERMAIN_. Wow. You can find me, Mark, at the Baseball Biz on Twitter as well. Well, thank you again for joining us here today on Baseball Biz on Deck. And as always, you can find us on this platform or wherever else you enjoy your favorite shows. And leave us a like, leave us a love, and any nice kind words you want to share. And we look forward to talking to you guys again real soon. Special thanks to X-Take RUX for the music rocking forward. Yay!